I was staring out of the floor-to-ceiling window in my office, the skyline of New York glowing against the fading sunset. The glass reflected a woman I sometimes barely recognized, tailored silk blouse, hair swept neatly into a bun, heels resting under a mahogany desk that cost more than the car I once drove to my first job. To the world, I was composed, untouchable, successful. But underneath there were stories I rarely spoke aloud. My phone buzzed, its vibration humming against the polished wood. I glanced at the screen.
Mom.
For a moment, I didn't move. My hand hovered above the phone, heart tight in my chest. It wasn't that I didn't love her. It was that I remembered too well the sound of her voice years ago, the exact moment she refused my help when I had nothing but determination to offer. That sting never truly left me. I pressed accept, slowly, steadying my breath. "Claire," she said, her voice trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. "Your father and we need you." The irony almost made me laugh, though my throat burned instead. Years ago, they didn't want me, my ideas, my efforts, my help. And now they depended on me. I swiveled my chair toward the city, pressing my lips together as silence stretched between us. Somewhere deep inside, hurt and pride twisted together. But above it all was one undeniable truth. The balance of power had shifted.
I was 19 the first time I tried to help them.
College acceptance letter in one hand, a half-written budget plan in the other, I had marched into the living room with a mixture of fear and determination. My parents were seated on the worn beige couch, Dad with his newspaper, Mom folding laundry. I still remember the smell of lemon detergent clinging to the air, sharp and clean, almost too clean for the conversation I was about to force. "I can apply for extra scholarships," I began, voice shaking but firm. "I can work part-time, and I found this business idea online, something small, but I know it could grow. I want to help us get ahead." Dad lowered his paper slowly, eyebrows furrowed. Mom's hands froze over a towel. For a heartbeat, I thought they might be proud. Instead, silence carved its way into the room. "Claire," Mom finally said, her tone soft but laced with dismissal, "you don't need to worry about these things. Focus on your studies. We don't need your experiments." Dad added, without looking at me, "You're too young to know how the world works. We'll handle things." The words sliced deeper than they could have imagined. My hands trembled so badly the paper crumpled. My chest burned with the sting of being unheard, unwanted in the one place I thought my effort might matter. That night, I packed the acceptance letter back into its envelope and cried quietly under my blanket. But in the silence, my grandmother's voice echoed, a memory from years before, when she placed a silver locket into my palm. "Someday," she had whispered, "they'll doubt you. When they do, we're this close to your heart, and remember, doubt is fuel, not a cage." I found the locket at the bottom of my drawer, cool against my fingers. I clasped it around my neck and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Red eyes, shaky hands, but a spark, small, defiant, flickered in me. If they didn't want my help, fine. I would stop offering. The next morning, I walked out of the house not just as their daughter, but as a young woman who had decided my life would not be defined by their refusal. It hurt, God, it hurt, but it also pushed me toward independence. That rejection became the quiet fire I carried into every choice that followed. The first months on my own were brutal. I rented a tiny studio apartment above a noisy diner in Brooklyn, where the scent of frying bacon and burnt coffee seeped through the floorboards every morning. My mattress was secondhand, my dishes mismatched, and the radiator hissed like an angry cat all winter. But it was mine. Every squeak of the floorboards reminded me this was the life I was building, not the one I had been denied. I worked 2 jobs, barista by morning, receptionist by evening, and spent the nights hunched over my laptop. My business idea, the one my parents had dismissed as an experiment, slowly began to take shape. I researched obsessively, teaching myself everything from digital marketing to bookkeeping through free online courses. Some nights, exhaustion blurred the words on the screen, but I pressed on, whispering my grandmother's words like a mantra. Doubt is fuel, not a cage. Then came my first break. At the cafe, I often chatted with customers, learning their stories. One morning, I struck up a conversation with a woman in her 50s, elegant in a navy pantsuit, tapping away on her phone. She was Laura Bennett, a consultant for several startups. Something in my eagerness must have caught her attention, because the next day, she asked me, "What is it you're working on so passionately?" I hesitated, but then spilled everything. My idea, my vision, the night spent building it. She listened without interruption, then smiled. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said. "Call me stubborn, but I believe in women like you." Laura became my first mentor. She guided me through business plans, connected me with small investors, and more importantly, reminded me that failure wasn't fatal. It was a step. The failures came, plenty of them. I launched my first online campaign only to hear crickets. I met with potential clients who laughed politely and told me I was too inexperienced. There were nights I curled up on my thin mattress, tears soaking the pillow, convinced I wasn't cut out for this. But each setback made me sharper. I adjusted, rebranded, learned. My first real victory arrived one rainy Thursday. I had just closed a deal with a local boutique that agreed to use my digital strategy services. When they wired me $500, more than I had ever made in one transaction, I sat in the dark with my laptop glowing and cried, laughing between sobs. It wasn't much, but it was proof. Proof that I could create something on my own. From there, the victories grew. One client became three became 10. My small, scrappy agency began to generate steady income. Within 3 years, I moved out of that cramped studio into a loft that overlooked the East River. My bank account was no longer a source of dread, but of pride. And yet, whenever I visited my parents on holidays, I downplayed everything. "Work is fine," I'd say, slipping envelopes of cash into my bag without their knowledge, paying for groceries quietly, never mentioning the company registered under my name. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. Success was mine, but I kept it hidden. After all, they had refused my help once. They didn't need to know how much I had grown since. The day they showed up unannounced, I was in the middle of preparing for a client presentation. My office, perched on the 22nd floor of a glass tower in Manhattan, was a sanctuary of everything I had built: sleek modern furniture, walls adorned with abstract art from local women painters, and a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled with titles that had carried me through sleepless nights. When my assistant buzzed me, saying, "Claire, there are 2 visitors here. They say they're your parents," my stomach flipped. For a moment, I froze, fingers hovering over my laptop keys. I hadn't expected to see them like this. Not here, not in my world. "Send them in," I finally said, my voice steady though my pulse raced. The door opened and there they were. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her once perfectly coiffed hair streaked with gray. My father's shoulders slumped, his eyes scanning the room with quiet unease. They both paused on the threshold, as if unsure whether they even belonged in this polished space. "Claire," Mom's voice cracked slightly. Well, we didn't know where else to go." I gestured for them to sit on the leather chairs across from my desk. They lowered themselves slowly, their eyes darting around. I saw the flicker of recognition in their expressions as they absorbed the details. The gold nameplate on my desk reading Claire Thompson, founder and CEO, the framed magazine cover on the wall where I'd been profiled as one of the city's rising entrepreneurs, the quiet hum of success that clung to the room. My father cleared his throat. "We've had some difficulties. Financial, medical." He avoided my eyes. "We thought maybe you could." He stopped, words catching. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded in my lap. For years, I had imagined this moment, rehearsed what I might say. A part of me wanted to lash out, to remind them of that night when they refused my help, when they made me feel small and naive. But as I looked at them now, fragile, humbled, I felt a swirl of emotions I couldn't easily untangle. "You remember," I began softly, "when I offered to help you? When I wanted to contribute, to make things better?" Mom's cheeks flushed. "Claire, we were trying to protect you. We didn't want you to worry about things beyond your age. No, I said, my voice firmer now. You didn't believe in me. You didn't think I could handle the world. So I had to go and prove it without you. The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. My parents exchanged a glance, guilt etched into their features. I rose from my chair, smoothing the folds of my blouse, and walked to the window. The city stretched out below, chaotic, alive, merciless. This, I said, turning back to them, is what I built. The company, the home, the life. All those nights you never knew about, all the failures and triumphs. I carried them alone. Their eyes widened as the truth settled in. My mother blinked rapidly, as if holding back tears. My father leaned forward, gripping the armrests, his voice hoarse. You did all this? I nodded. And more. The agency you've probably seen ads for? Mine. The campaigns that went viral?
Mine.
The name you never thought would mean anything? It means everything here. For a moment, they were speechless. The disbelief in their faces slowly gave way to something else. Shame, awe, regret, pride, all tangled together. Finally, Mom whispered, "We're sorry." It was the first time I had ever heard those words from her lips. I let the silence linger, savoring the shift in power, the reversal of years of dismissal. They had once refused my help. Now, sitting in my office, surrounded by proof of what I had become, they had no choice but to depend on me. And for the first time in my life, I had the choice of whether to say yes. I let them sit there for a long moment, their eyes fixed on me as if I held the key to everything. In a way, I did. The girl they once silenced had grown into the woman they now depended on. And I wasn't going to waste this chance to make things clear. "I'll help you," I said finally. Relief washed over their faces, but I held up a hand before they could speak. But not without conditions. Their expressions faltered. I crossed the room and sat back at my desk, the leather chair cradling me like a throne. My voice was calm, even, but it carried the weight of years. "If I support you, it won't be like before. I'm not the daughter you can dismiss when it's inconvenient. You'll respect me and yourselves." Dad frowned slightly. "Respect you? Claire, we always—" "No." I cut in, sharper than I intended. "You didn't. And that's why we're here. So let me be clear." I raised one finger. "First, no more pretending everything is fine when it's not. I need honesty. If you're struggling, you tell me. You don't brush me off because you think I can't handle it." They both nodded slowly, shame softening their features. "Second," I continued, "Dad, your health comes first. That means no more ignoring doctor's orders, no more late-night drinking, no more stubborn pride that lands you in a hospital bed. If I'm going to invest in your care, you'll cooperate fully." His jaw tightened, but after a beat, he gave a small nod. "Third," I said, turning to my mother, "you've spent your life putting everyone else first, then resenting it quietly. It's time you pursue something of your own, painting, writing, whatever sparks joy. But no more living only in the shadows of Dad's choices. If I'm helping, then you're living." Her eyes widened, tears gathering. For the first time, I saw something break open in her, a recognition that this wasn't just about survival, but about reclaiming herself. "And finally," I said, leaning forward, my voice gentler now, "you treat me as your equal, not as a child who doesn't understand the world. I've proven I do. If you can't accept that, then I can't help." The silence was thick, but not hostile. It was the silence of truth settling into bones. My parents looked at each other, then back at me, and I could see the shift, slow, hesitant, but real. Dad's shoulders slumped. "You're right," he said quietly. "We failed you. But if you'll still have us, we'll do it. We'll change." Mom reached across the desk, her hand trembling as it touched mine. "We'll try, Claire. We'll try, because we don't want to lose you again." For years, I had longed to hear those words, not the apology alone, but the willingness to grow. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just saving them. I was rewriting the rules of our family. Change didn't happen overnight, but it began in small, quiet ways. My father started attending his appointments, even calling me afterward to update me, something the younger version of him would have considered weakness. Sometimes he sounded annoyed, sometimes resigned, but beneath it, I heard the truth. He was trying. My mother dusted off her old easel, tucked away for decades in the attic. At first, her strokes were hesitant, the colors pale. But as weeks passed, her canvases grew bolder, brighter, as though she was painting herself back into existence. One afternoon, she sent me a photo of a finished piece, wild sunflowers spilling across the canvas, and I couldn't stop smiling. And me? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel not just the hurt of the past, but the healing of the present. I had carried their rejection like a stone in my chest, but now, watching them take ownership of their growth, that weight began to lift. One evening, as I prepared for another late-night strategy call, I found myself reaching for the silver locket my grandmother had given me. It still hung against my skin, cool and steady. I opened it, running my thumb across its worn engraving. Doubt is fuel, not a cage. She had been right all along. My parents' doubt had hurt me, but it had also propelled me forward, shaping the woman who now stood tall in her own story. The past couldn't be erased. The scars remained. But scars, I realized, weren't marks of weakness. They were proof of survival. Proof that I had endured, grown, and emerged stronger. I closed the locket and looked out the window, the city lights glittering like 1,000 possibilities. My parents had once refused my help, and now they depended on me. But this time, the power wasn't in their need. It was in my choice to give, with boundaries, with strength, with grace. And as I leaned back in my chair, I knew the truth that would carry me forward, steady as the pulse in my veins. I am no longer the girl they doubted. I am the woman they depend on.